My idea that I use with teenagers is to connect them with the music that they like. And what I do is I ask them to write no more than 150 words, but generally it's about 100, 120 words, about their favourite song and why they like it. So far, everybody's managed to do this, and what they generally realise is that they don't have the specific vocabulary to describe the music accurately unless they are indeed musicians themselves. And what they tend to do is connect the music to their lives, how they see themselves, to their friends, where they were when they first heard that music, what it means to them, and often that's a more deeper and more enriching meaning for them anyway. Okay.
One of the things I do, bearing in mind, I have a lot of practice of this, because I do this all the time, sort of twice, 3 times a week in schools, is the whole idea is you get this blank bit of paper, which we were talking about, and sometimes it becomes a barrier, it's hard to break down. And what I get them to do is think about structure, but in a kind of structuring stories, but in a slightly less formal way, which is to think about the character and create and ask the character questions. And you ask them all kinds of ridiculous questions, like would they choose KFC or McDonald's if they had the choice? And you know, the key is to get them to understand the character so well that when they put them in any situation, walk around any corner, they'll know the character well enough, or characters well enough, to know exactly what kind of reaction they're going to get from them, and it helps them start thinking about motivation. And the thing about motivation, and if you don't understand the motivation of your character, you're never going to get to the end of, you're not going to start writing, and you're definitely not going to know where to go, and it starts to break those barriers down. The other one is, it's a very silly one. It's about getting them to think about the world, to think about outside of their own being, outside of their own heads. And the one I use all the time is getting them to think about what would a mouse would play with if it came through the door, write 5 lines, and they do it, and then I tell them to go out the door, and then I make them crawl back in on their hands and knees and say, well actually you didn't do that before, so how do you know what a mouse is going to play with? So they do it again, and then they rewrite it, and they have a different perspective. And it's a bit jokey and very, very, very silly, but it just breaks down this idea. And what I said was, when you wake up in the morning, your imagination doesn't necessarily wake up with you. And sometimes you need a kickstart, it needs a kickstart. And these are very simple techniques that I use, and I use them based on other authors I've seen use them, and lots of people do this, lots of people that teach creative writing do them. But these are just basics.
We do a thing when we write feature films or sitcoms or dramas where it's called a beat sheet, and you basically sum up each scene in a line, and what that gives you basically is the through line narrative without, and it distills everything down, and it's really helpful because it's very quick, and you don't feel like you're writing, but you are, and that is your route map through what you do, so that's good fun. And I'd suggest maybe they do a beat sheet for their favourite song, for the pop video of their favourite song, trying to steer them away from Bentleys and guns where possible. Dollar dollar bill y'all. And then the other thing that's really handy is to give them an ending. So literally give them the last line, then 3 random objects, and get them to write those 3 random objects to come to that ending. Because that way you've psychologically broken down the empty sheet, and you get to use that can of chicken soup that's past the sell-by date in a very practical way.
Same when I go into schools and youth centres and wherever else where we do workshops, there's a few different exercises. We do one's called the Minister's Cat, which is a plain word game where you start on the letter A and you only have the letter A, and you'll say the Minister's cat is an arrogant cat, the Minister's cat is an audacious cat, and you'll play that game till you run out of the letter A, or just get your brain thinking. You have games like one word story, where I'll say once upon a time a green goblin, blah blah blah. But the kind of main exercise we have that I think opens perception and challenges people, particularly related to Shakespeare, is we have an exercise where we get quotes said by rappers or hip hop artists and quotes said by Shakespeare, and we ask people to tell the difference. And no one, not even the head of education at the Globe, has ever got them all right. Say McKellen even got 2 wrong. Because it's the Bentleys and Guns generation, it's not those guys. We're talking about Chuck D, we're talking about KRS-One, we're talking about Gil Scott-Heron. And because this perception of hip hop as being these wallies that are on the television now, it immediately then people step back and go, wow, this isn't what people are writing about anymore, kind of thing. And so yeah, we found that always without fail works, because no one ever gets them all right, ever. So.
I want to come to your workshop.
amount of because it's always interesting too, because
Yeah.
you always, especially if you've read a lot of Shakespeare, like the head of education at Globe, really thought he was going to get them all right, and when they didn't, they were just like, how? I did it on Newsnight actually as well, and David Aranovich got one much to his chagrin.
Libraries have DVDs, they have newspapers, magazines, and it might be a really great way to get young people to go around the library, find a newspaper or two, look at a couple of the headlines of the day, maybe pick up a film title, the DVD shelf, magazine, find an article, and then to use what text they find as a stimulus to start a poem or a short paragraph, or even just a dialogue with their mentor, but based on what's currently out there, because we are talking about writing about contemporary life, we're talking about writing about current global issues. If that's what we're going to be writing about, well, let's look at all the different sources where you could do your research and find material.
There was a flood in Africa somewhere, and there was a very evocative picture of this young girl with a baby being lifted up. And I used that image to set the scene for a poem. Say, look, describe what's happening here, and also what do you think she's feeling at this moment in time, while she's being lifted out of this flood, clutching a baby. And that spurred them on to do some writing. Thank you for mentioning that. It just reminded me of something I had done before.